same lady from the luncheon? Look, Sophia meeting a reporter. People are gonna start to get ideas. Your father might not like...
Stop! Stop talking. I don't need your advice. I don't care what you think. No one does. You are my driver. That is all you are. So stop talking and drive.
In part 1, we explored how strain theory helps us understand why people like Vic and the other citizens of Gotham might rally behind Oz and fall into a life of crime and deviance. We also discussed how the interplay of labeling theory and gaslighting explains Sofia Falcone's descent into crime and ruthlessness. These types of drastic criminal transformations raise a deeply unsettling question. Are people's darker sides always present, waiting to be triggered, or are they entirely shaped by the environments they grow up in? In other words, are we all born as blank slates, with our behavior shaped entirely by early experiences? Or are some of us simply born bad, destined to act on violent and devious impulses when the time is right? As we just saw in that flashback scene, Sophia could be callous and unkind to Oz, even before she was ever gaslit or framed as a killer. These behaviors, coupled with her later actions, including poisoning her entire family with gas, reflect the complex interplay between Carmine's manipulative influence and her own latent potential for violence, or in other words, nature versus nurture. Nature versus nurture is a long-standing debate in psychology and social science that explores the origins of human behavior and personality. Nature refers to the traits we are born with, our genetic predispositions, biological makeup, and innate characteristics. In this view, our personalities, tendencies, and even potential for good or bad behavior are hardwired into us from birth. Nurture, on the other hand, emphasizes the role of environment and experience in shaping who we become. Factors such as upbringing, socioeconomic conditions, trauma, and education all contribute to the person we grow into. In reality, most researchers agree that human behavior is shaped by a complex interaction of both nature and nurture. While it appears that Sophia's violence was a direct consequence of her traumatic experiences, her actions also suggest a latent proclivity for cruelty, one that lay dormant until activated by years of abuse. This interplay of nature and nurture is vividly portrayed in Oz's story, where his inherited tendencies and the manipulative and abusive influence of his mother collide to create one of Gotham's most dangerous figures.
Ma? I'm gonna take care of you, Ma. You know that, right?
If Oz is what you say, guys like him, they can serve a purpose.
I'd do anything for you.
Go on to do big fucking things, especially in my line of work. But you gotta know how to control them.
And if you don't believe me, well, you don't gotta. Because I'm gonna prove it to you.
What kind of man can't take care of his own mother?
She'll never look at me again. Unless I get this done. Got a promise to keep.
What you did wasn't impulsive. It was instinctual. This city is meant to be yours, sweetheart. What are you gonna do to get it?
As we've just seen, Oswald's relationship with his mother, Frances, is deeply complex and troubled. From a young age, he craves her attention and validation, but her behavior is erratic and inconsistent. This unstable dynamic, further complicated by the presence of the gangster Rex Calabrese, has a profound impact on his development. Oz frequently states that he would do anything for his mom, a sentiment that underscores his deep and at times disturbing attachment to her. This is painfully illustrated by his actions as a child, when his desperate need for her attention led him to trap his brothers, Jack and Benny, in a flooded sewer tunnel, leaving them to drown so he could be the center of his mother's world. Early in the show, we see Oz's mom is giving him attention and showing affection, only to completely disregard him when his two brothers show up, which makes Oz visibly upset. Later, she is considering having Rex murder Oz for what he did to Jack and Benny, only to change her mind and keep him alive so she can groom and shape him into becoming a criminal and give her the lifestyle she feels entitled to. This type of conditional love is a hallmark of someone with a disorganized attachment style. Disorganized attachment often arises in children whose caregivers provide love that is inconsistent or conditional. When affection depends on meeting the caregiver's needs or expectations rather than being unconditional, it creates confusion, insecurity, and fear in the child. For Oz, his mother's pattern of using love as a tool to control him not only destabilizes his sense of love, but also lays the groundwork for his warped understanding of loyalty in relationships later in life. But before we dive deeper into how Oswald's attachment shaped his personality in adult relationships, let's first explore the foundations of attachment theory. Attachment theory, first developed by John Bowlby and expanded upon by Mary Ainsworth, explains how early interactions with caregivers shape an individual's emotional bonds and relational patterns throughout life. These early bonds influence how people perceive themselves and others in relationships. Attachment styles fall into 4 primary categories. Secure attachment. Individuals with secure attachment generally experience consistent and responsive caregiving. They tend to have positive views of themselves and others, making them capable of forming healthy, stable relationships. Anxious attachment. This style often arises from inconsistent caregiving, where love and attention are unpredictable. Individuals with anxious attachment are often preoccupied with fears of abandonment and crave validation from others. Avoidant attachment. Stemming from neglectful or emotionally distant caregiving, avoidantly attached individuals may suppress their emotional needs, preferring self-reliance over vulnerability in relationships. Disorganized attachment. A result of chaotic, abusive, or highly inconsistent caregiving, this style is marked by conflicting desires for closeness and a fear of relationships. Disorganized attachment often leads to a push-pull dynamic in connection with others. Now, there's this commonly held misconception that attachment styles are rigid and discrete categories. However, this is an oversimplification. As Dr. Judy Ho explains in her book, The New Rules of Attachment styles exist on a spectrum, with many individuals blending behaviors that align with different styles depending on the context of the relationship or situation. Current research highlights this complexity, especially for those with disorganized attachment. These individuals often vacillate between anxious and avoidant behaviors because their early caregiving relationships were marked by both fear and a longing for closeness. Now, I also want to stress that attachment styles can change over time through new experiences or relationships. So if you're watching this video thinking, oh my God, I have anxious, avoidant, disorganized attachment, I'm so screwed up, don't panic, don't worry. Some studies estimate that only 25% of people have secure attachment, so most of us are on a spectrum somewhere in these other groups. These things really only become a problem when it causes significant difficulties or impairment in either your own life or the people around you.
I'm sorry, Oz. We'll start over, all right? I'll be at this time.
Have fun getting out!
Hey! Oz, open the door. Get back here and open this door. Oz,
This horrific act shows Oz's desperation for his mother's love, but also his willingness to be cruel to get it. Oz's bond with his mother reflects a disorganized attachment intertwined with anxious and avoidant styles that typically arise from caregiving that is erratic, neglectful, or abusive, patterns clearly evident in Francis's treatment of Oswald. Francis alternates between neglecting Oswald in favor of his brothers prior to their deaths and exploiting him to fulfill her own desires, creating a deeply chaotic environment that undermines any sense of security for him and further cementing his chaotic and fear-driven approach to relationships. According to the show's writers, Oswald initially trapped his brothers in a sewer as revenge for their bullying. However, upon realizing that rainfall would flood the sewer and drown them, he chose not to intervene, seemingly to ensure he wouldn't have to compete for his mother's affection. Such trauma during formative years can exacerbate a disorganized attachment style, leaving Oswald unable to form secure relationships and reliant on control and manipulation as defense mechanisms. This act underscores the extreme lengths Oz was willing to go to in securing his mother's love and validation, a hallmark of anxious attachment. At the same time, his willingness to detach from the consequences of his actions reflects the vacillating nature of disorganized attachment between anxious and avoidant styles. Finally, in the show's final moments, Oz's decision to kill Vic, because he feels they have become like family and that family makes one vulnerable, is one of the clearest displays of avoidant attachment manifesting in adulthood. By this point in his criminal career, Oz had no hesitation about eliminating perceived threats to his control, even when they came from someone as loyal as Vic. Vic's declaration of familial connection was likely enough to trigger Oz's deep-seated fear of closeness, rooted in his disorganized attachment style. Without a second thought, Oz chose to sever that connection permanently, viewing vulnerability as a liability he just could not afford. However, as we said earlier, only about 25% of the population has a secure attachment style, putting the rest of us somewhere on the spectrum of insecure, avoidant, and disorganized attachment. Thankfully, most of us don't go around murdering, manipulating, or committing acts of cruelty to people. So, if Oz's cruel and manipulative behavior isn't fully explained by his attachment struggles, what else could explain his behavior?